Welcome to MentorTime, everybody. Today, I'm excited about this topic. We now do a quarterly update on the changing nature of work. We originally called it work from home because that's how it was early in COVID. We started doing these over 2 years ago, and we're now routinely doing them quarterly. So let's get started. We have no submitted question today, so we'll go right in the topic. What do you need to know about what's going on in work? We usually have 3 topic areas. Today, we're going to do updates in this quarter, changes, what I'm calling indications of things changing that are not necessarily being documented. And then finally, instead of what should you do, you will see throughout this that most of today is about you being aware of the shifting sands. So this isn't necessarily a place where I say, now you're going to update your CV, or when we've done quarterly updates in the past, that we were going through the great resignation and the power that employees had at that time. All right. If you've been here before, you'll recognize the WFH Work Research. It's a monthly newsletter that comes out that summarizes topics from the SW, which I can't remember exactly what that means, but it's a survey that they do to figure out what's going on in the work world. We use it routinely in these talks, and here's the big news that I've seen. No changes in a lot of the stuff we spent a lot of time talking about before. The number of days people are working from home has leveled out for the last 6 months at 28%. Still a big gap between what employers are willing to give and what employees want in terms of work from home. We know, continuing, fewer jobs are being offered that are fully remote that employees want. And no surprise, this is again one of those changes that's working from home is more common in cities for a variety of reasons. And I'm glad all of you who are on today are such great data people. You'll understand some of my potentially, these are my statistical and epi comments in terms of what we're not seeing in parsing this data. I want to remind you of this graph. You've seen it before if you've been on these or if you've looked at the recordings for previous ones, and remind us that not all jobs are equal. So when they talk about fully remote jobs, they cover the water from the bottom, which is hospitality and food services, all the way to information, including technology. The yellow is one of the bands that I talked about in the past, the ones that are most likely to be jobs amenable to be working from home or even have a hybrid role. Excuse me. All right, so they concentrated a lot this time on fully remote. It was interesting that this is what the update in June was. And what they were describing has now come in as statistics because this is the first time we've seen 10% of people are fully remote, meaning 5 days a week or 4 days a week, whatever their work week is, the paid days. And what we know as well, or what they know now, is even those who are fully remote seem to meet with co-workers in person at least once a month. Almost half. I'm being very liberal when I round up and round down. So just understand, I know I'm rounding quite a bit. This table, the data in this table, I assume comes from reliable sources, but I'm not convinced that if you're fully remote, you've got higher earnings. There's a lot of conflation in this data and in other studies I'll be talking about, that depending on the job, this is true. So you'll see later on something about call centers. Those are not jobs those are jobs that are typically fully remote, but they're not the same as the professional jobs that many of us as knowledge workers do on a daily basis and work in a hybrid or fully remote fashion. However, it was interesting to me that if they're fully remote, they also meet their coworkers twice a month, and that means they earn, that signifies that they're earning more. To me, that means you have responsibilities for team members, you have a need to go into an office. You're not sitting doing consultancy work from your desk at home where you're working with a remote team, but not necessarily able to travel to that team. Oops, I clicked on something and didn't get where I need to be. Hang on, give me a second. Okay, there we go. All right. Here we see that from May 23 data, almost 2/3 of people are working fully on site. This number is climbing, and we've watched it climb over the last 2 quarters. What we're also seeing is that hybrid's leveling out at about 30%, but it's been that way, rocking between 25 to 30% for the last 4 quarters, certainly the last year. This is more a point of interest. Interestingly enough, the oldest workers that they categorize are either fully remote or fully on site, more so fully remote than any other age differences and age categories. And I'm not sure what they're doing and counting for fully remote. I do wish I could dig into the data, but I'm not that interested to ask them for it. All right. Here's a set of charts that, again, I wish I knew more about the categories of people that they're talking to. But they basically say, oh, workers have all this flexibility that when they work at home, they can do more things. When I look at the data, and again, I'm not looking at significance levels or p-values or statistical differences, what I see is exercising during the workday. Yes, there's a difference. Not a big deal. Some people call it exercise, some don't. Running personal errands, to me, that's very close in terms of the whether you work from home or not. The bigger differences for working from home is that you can get chores done during the workday, which you can't do. You can't throw in laundry, or you can't, do a massive cooking in the morning and package it up later. And same thing for childcare. Again, not surprising, but I just want you to see, in my mind, work from home research, this group that does this, it feels to me like there's not enough big differences in what they're finding anymore. And so they're starting to scrape more data that we haven't seen in this level of detail. And partly because there's not a lot indicating to me any big differences. This is one of the charts that I look at and I say, yes, you're concentrating on technology, but you're not accounting for how people are using it. You're just asking them, do they use it and how much? So I did this by just taking apart the chart, doing a cut and paste because I didn't want to recreate data. But I separated it out so that you could see the difference between hybrid and remote workers on the left and in-person workers on the right, and how they match up. Biggest difference, remote and hybrid, they do both Zoom and Microsoft Teams. If you add it together, and again, adding it together isn't good. It's not statistically correct to do because all of these were multiple choice items. But I wanted to add it up to show you what they're implying. People who are remote use Zoom and Teams more and do more email. Not surprising, right? The people who are fully in person do use Teams and Zoom, and less email. But what we don't know is how much meetings are these people involved in terms of, I can envision someone who's in person going into a conference room and being in a meeting where there are hybrid attendees, but the person themselves, I'm not using the technology sitting in that conference room. So I would have answered this question differently. So again, not sure about what the data says, but what's interesting to me is messaging on your personal phone. I think what that means is many companies now have BYOD, bring your own device, and use it for both work and personal stuff. And so they're talking about having no separate cell phone from a company and you having to do your work on that. But again, they don't have a lot of explanation. All right, that's the work from home research. Thank you to Peter for pointing out this study. He emailed Ron and me a couple days ago. I had seen earlier this week last week a BBC report about, productivity declines if you work from home. And I looked at the blurb. It was a blurb. There wasn't a lot in it. And I thought, I need to look at it further. Peter, thank you, because this gave me some important information. So the article started off with the fact that we had seen that productivity does not suffer in the pandemic, and that has been well documented. And then last month, this group, the Federal Reserve Board from New York, I know that they're a good organization. I don't know much about their research capacity, but look at what they looked at. They looked at call centers. Call centers have had a negative impact on their work. And what they're talking about is negative impact on the quality of the call, and the fact that people may not be getting their questions answered because it took longer to get calls resolved. That's a very different kind of work from home, work remote, these call centers, than the kind of professional level jobs that we've been seeing as remote or hybrid options. And they don't acknowledge that in here, really. On top of that, then The Economist picked up the same specious arguments and wrote this long article, which I wasn't willing to pay for, so I showed you here what I was able to see. And they talk about a starting point as a working paper from 2020. We all know how rapidly things have changed since 2020. So I felt, not only are they saying it's less productive to work from home, but they're using potentially old data. And interestingly enough, when I searched to try to get the Economist paper free of charge, I came upon this researcher. I think her name is Advait Sarkar. I assume it's a she, who wrote a whole blog on her WordPress about why this Economist article is wrong. She starts right off saying, I've been working in this somewhat, so I'm knowledgeable, and ignore this article and think about you as a manager. The best way to use this evidence is a policy of which she calls being maximal negotiated autonomy. So giving employees flexibility to work. I want to point out two of the several arguments she made and show you where I feel like news organizations are selectively choosing what they want to describe, such as the call center study. She talked about number 5, a lab experiment to show that there's less innovation. These are my words, less innovation if you work on a video conference, work from home. This is based on a study from a couple years ago or longer, where they spent 5 minutes in an activity, teams in person and teams virtually, 5 minutes to come up with creative ideas for something. The difference between the virtual team and the in-person team was 1 less study on the virtual team side. Again, is that the best measure of creativity? Is that even a useful activity for creativity? I don't think it is, but certainly the difference of one, whether it's 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 20, there wasn't a big difference in performance of the groups. The second is, she talks about researchers who looked at Microsoft communication records of 60,000+ employees, that networks were becoming more, they call them static and isolated. And so they analyzed all of these things. At the same time, this was across the same period of COVID, where we suddenly had burgeoning efforts on building up and interacting with more and more networks, because we weren't able to do in-person meetings or in-person seminars or in-person networking. And I have a little knowledge about how networks function. I've studied them for many years. They get to a point where people don't participate a lot. Think about you and your work in the last couple of years. Every place we turn, someone wants me to be on a platform and engage and tell them how great is my banking service, how great is the grocery store, come to your private customer service portal. Everybody wants us to engage because they can measure it, they can talk about the numbers of eyeballs and clicks. So are the communication records necessarily documenting what that network is doing? I don't know. She says that as well. She actually talked about being in Microsoft there. But she did say, is that the best measure of the way in which people are networking and keeping in touch? So an interesting WordPress blog. And to end, I just had to show you this. She took a quote from the Art of the Economist article itself and said, I'll end mine with this statement that some tasks are better done from home when you need to put your head down and really work hard. Like many of us have stayed home to write reports or to do deep thinking about business development opportunities. Then came the Global Hybrid Working Report. This came out a couple months ago. I'm going to show you some quick things. These are no aha moments. 6 in 10 employees are part of a hybrid team. We're not surprised in this day and age. Whether or not you work globally, you're likely to have people that are working off-site. Same proportion almost is people who go into the office regularly. So I highlighted or tried to draw a rhomboid around the office occasional and then the office first, showing that a large part of people do this. Again, not a duh, but people are going into the office. They're just not going in regularly, many of them. We know that the pandemic made building relationships difficult, but many of us learned how to do it and in fact have valuable, collaborative, and productive relationships. And as you can see in the box at the top, what surprised me is that people felt even in a hybrid or fully remote world, they were able to do more of their work and get feedback and get mentored, which I thought was really positive because people talked about early in COVID, if you're away from the office, you won't get support from your supervisor, etc. And you can see at the bottom, these are things that we keep being told is harder to do, building relationships, staying connected. But it's happening, even if people say it's difficult to do. 2 groups of people they've identified that need more support and maybe should be in the office: younger employees and those in management positions. And they talk about the fact, and I bring this up because I always try to remind you all that it's not just the employees' opportunity and needs. The companies need to be taking care of a changing workforce. It may not go back to what it was early in the pandemic with most people working from home if they could, but they're still going to be pushed to have more work-life balance, to have different ways of working. And as many of us on this call know, and if you're watching the replay, many of us live and work in a global world where we work on distributed teams anyway. And so the good news is we've been able to successfully make the transition and show that we can do this work effectively. As long as companies help people stay engaged, and that includes technology, management, and leadership support, and the needs that you have when and if you do go into the office. Finally, there was a research paper from Stanford that has come out recently, and what I put in the top left corner was just to acknowledge yesterday seeing this tweet from Nick Bloom, who alerted me to it. And their interest in this is that although it seemed to be a one-off because of the pandemic that we were doing more working from home, now they see it as what they call longer run growth acceleration in working from home, meaning it started, things are going to change, work's going to change, and we're going to be changing with it. So a couple things I wanted to show you, which continue to reinforce what we've seen in other research. They measured impact on productivity in 2022, and workers said that they were more productive and managers said they were less productive. Again, nothing that we haven't seen before. But they also highlighted that many times people survey and don't make a distinction between what is their definition in questions for hybrid and for remote. The work from home research that we've seen in past quarters sometimes is you are hybrid if you work 1 day a week in the office. You're hybrid if you work 4 days a week in the office. So it's not been a consistent definition. And again, looking at what return to office efforts are, there were 2 things here in this summary from a recent report, that those firms that have mandated going back to the office are suffering from employee attrition, people leaving because they don't want to go back. And almost a third of them are struggling to recruit, which is interesting because it's showing that employees do value flexible opportunities. This statistic we've seen before, not necessarily 84%, but we've seen before that employers are not willing to and are reluctant to promote people who are not in the office. This says 84% of employers are saying that there are limited chances to progress if you don't come into the office, which I think is very short-sighted, and I don't know where all this data came from. But I'm just telling you that there are still employers that think they're in the driver's seat, and they are to a certain extent, more so than a year and a half ago, but they still have a lot of employees that even if they're out of a job right now, they're not willing to take jobs requiring them to go back to an office if they need the situation to be work from home or want it to be. All right, so I want to talk now about what I'm seeing in the Google Lit search, my Glit search. What have I been reading? What have I been seeing? What am I hearing recruiters? I follow a couple great recruiters talk about, and you'll see that there are indications of what's going on that aren't being captured in surveys in terms of the changing work environment. The other day, Dorothy Dalton tweeted out this from the World Economic Forum, fastest growing and fastest declining jobs. I highlighted robotic tech engineers and electrotechnology engineers only because I wanted a reminder to say, I don't know, I didn't go look at all the World Economic Forum data, the report, but I expected, given the burgeoning of ChatGPT and other generative AI tools that have come out, I expected to see prompt engineers. We've talked about this in the past few weeks, that people who write prompts, people who know how to basically apply a coding methodology to get the generative AI to do relevant work. I thought that might show up on this list. It hasn't yet. Second thing, this came from a LinkedIn post that I saw. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, we've used their data in the past. It lags about 3 months. So in this case, this LinkedIn article that was written, a post was written a month ago, talked about the fact that the number of job openings are decreasing. The numbers of hires was staying the same and layoffs were increasing. And we've talked about layoffs as well. But this link goes to the original data source for these leading companies that announced layoffs. There's over 270 that have announced layoffs in 2023 of some kind. I follow a recruiter. He's a global recruiter. He's an amazing person. He has a podcast every Friday or a video cast on recruiting topics. And I originally started following him because someone I like was speaking on his podcast, but he does much more than recruiting and has had interesting topics that I watch and educate myself on. He has a newsletter he puts out. In one recent newsletter, he links to various articles and acknowledges why they're of interest. So this was a LinkedIn post, an article that someone wrote on LinkedIn about Schumpeter as a I don't remember when he was around. I learned about him in grad school. But Schumpeter's a name that some people seem to know, and he's a disruptor apparently. But this person talked about Schumpeterian creative destruction, which means things are always in flux and new technology surfaces as old ones are being pushed aside. Let me see why I'm not clicking on an arrow. And that this is how innovation comes about. And I think we've got a good example with ChatGPT. From December on, our lives have been upended. What's going to happen now? So that on the surface of a work mentality that has shifted beyond I have to work in an office to I can work from anywhere, to me was very interesting. And then I got to this sentence that says the cost of learning is getting optimized, meaning you don't have to pay as much anymore to get employees, for example, educated on a new skill. And then the article goes on to talk about it. And if you're interested, you can open up the LinkedIn link and you'll see a case example of Singapore, where Singapore's HR created a list, the SOL list, and I can't remember, I think it's something about jobs that are needed that aren't in place. That HR, so Hung Lee's interest in this article is that HR leaders need to be planning for both the macro environment and what's going on in your industry, as well as a different kind of skill building approach. Hung also had a recent pointing to what AI is going to be continuing to help us with. We'll be talking about this in August when we cover more on specifically on AI. What are we seeing with jobs and where might it impact you? And I highlighted in the top right that it's actually a McKinsey report, that a few functions can drive huge impact. So you can see that they would software engineering for corporate IT as well as for product development will take a large part of the company's resources, but the impact is going to be way beyond what other parts of the companies are doing. Again, from Hung in just his newsletter that came out the other day, there was his most recent Friday cast was on, the demographic crisis. And this point had been something I hadn't really focused on, but with so many countries going towards below replacement fertility rates, with a much smaller economically productive class of workers, those who are older will benefit to a certain amount, but then it will be an increasing problem of decreasing resources. So he actually ran a poll on this, but I wanted to remind you all, if you're interested, you might want to sign up for Hung Lee's newsletter and think about attending. If you can't attend his Friday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time, don't worry about it. He's on Crowdcast. You can watch the replay anytime, but it's always I always learn something from all the people that he has on talent specialization folks, different kinds of recruiters and different companies that help with related products for HR. And I think there's one more, yes. And then he also talked about a LinkedIn article that LinkedIn has written about how hiring managers and HR people are going to probably start putting more skills into job posts, because LinkedIn analyzed some of its data over the last 2 years and discovered that if you have more skills in your job posting, you'll have a higher open rate or click-through rate to potentially apply. Now, this note from Hung says, oh, but currently we've been told don't put too many skills in because people will self-select, saying that, oh, I don't have that skill, so I'm not going to apply. And he proposed that his friends could do a testable A/B hypothesis testing on it. But here's what the article says. And this surprised me. They are now calling this skills first hiring, a practice that 75% of talent professionals say they'll be implementing in the next year. My comment on this is what we've talked about with skills before. A skill by itself doesn't represent experience. So telling me that you excel doesn't tell me how you can use it or what you've done with it. And when we start getting to lists of skills, as we already have in resumes, they want a skills list because the AI can parse it more easily. What it says is that they are going for more and more efficiencies. I don't know that this is exactly what they mean, because this is just about all of LinkedIn's article. But you can see their data is from March 2021 to March 2023. Let me remind you that LinkedIn 2 years ago had a very anemic job section. It's in the last year, almost a year and a half now, it's made much more of an effort. There's millions more jobs on LinkedIn than there used to be. They also only analyzed job postings from companies that had 100 or more job postings. So what does that mean? Big companies. It doesn't mean average size companies. It doesn't apply to a lot of us, and potentially it's big companies that need specific skills. Technology is what comes to mind for me, coding and things like that. But the other thing the article says is skills-focused job posts are correlated with higher internal mobility. And I thought to myself, how are they tracking that? And what I assume they're looking at is they're looking at, if they were able to do this, the job posting and the job title. And they're looking at people, all the almost billion people that they've got in their database. And they're looking, saying, oh, did this person stay at the same job in the same company, but announce or put in that they have now a promotion or whatever it is like that. I don't know. It says it's determined by the share of job transitions, which again is either announcing you've gone somewhere or just updating your profile to add your experience. Not sure what LinkedIn's doing with this, but I don't know that means if there's skills in the job postings that you're going to be more internally mobile. It seems specious to me, but that's me. This was a tweet from Hung a couple days ago, using Bureau of Labor Statistics, a graph. The important thing about this graph is what Hung said. More women than men work from home, and that will have an effect on workforce diversity. So it's not that an organization won't be diverse with people working from home. What it is, if more women are at home, there'll be less women speaking up in meetings. There'll be less women seen in the office in terms of role models and access to diverse opinions and diverse knowledge and working with females. So for me, similar to the demographic crisis Hung Lee wrote about, this was something I had to stop and think about and think 13% is not a small amount. It's significant. Another trend, or surprising and actually something that made a lot of sense, and like, how did we get to 2023 before anybody thought about this? Pew announced that they're not going to use generational terms anymore in any of their research. So now what they say is they decided to change it because you can't compare Gen Z to millennials when those two age groups span from age 11 to 42, which is quite a bit of time, and obviously at different life stages. But here's the most important thing, which I can't believe no one's thought about in the past. All of these names were done on an ad hoc basis, except for the baby boomer generation, which was a defined demographic event and had a defined set period. And I thought to myself, wow, yeah, you're right. People just created a name every time there seemed to be a new reason to have a new generation. And I wanted to end talking about a pilot test that the UK did on a 4-day work week. They did it in the last half of 2022 for 6 months. People were able to work and not lose any pay working 4 days instead of 5. And not surprisingly, this group decided to conduct a survey just in February 2023 and figure out what did people think about it. Of course, they loved it. Everybody would love it. What I thought was interesting, though, is they were also saying maybe there are other reasons to do it besides employee satisfaction. They talk about climate change and the impact of less commuting and fewer office buildings being lit up from morning to night, for example, if people aren't in the offices. They also talk about people that have said beyond the normal about 10% of people who volunteer, that another 21% in this survey as part of the trial said, I would probably volunteer if I had an extra day at home. So no solutions on it. The groups that started the 4-day work weeks in the trial, most of them are still offering it. Other companies are not getting on board immediately. But as we've talked about a couple times during today, that is also something for which momentum can be building as there's more and more evidence of ways in which we can get work done in a shorter period of time. So there is no what should you do. There's just a lot of information that I wanted to share with you about how the world seems to be changing, what's going on around the world now that we've settled into patterns of on-site, hybrid, and fully remote positions. There's not a lot of change in that anymore, but there is a lot changing in the world, and that's, you can tell because look at all the links that I have, which you will get. I'll send just the list of links out for you all, and you'll have the recording to watch and look at more of the research. So I'll give my few image credits and ask if anybody has comments on this or any questions. The floor is open.
Sue.
Peter?
Yes, that was a lot of information. It was a lot of interesting stuff there. Thanks for the breakdown of the article that I sent and a lot of that kind of shoddy research and statistics. Part of why I sent it was I hadn't read it yet, but I figured that there was a lot of that. And as I read it, I saw a little bit of that, and you reinforced that. And that's partly why I sent it, for us to be thinking about when our boss comes back with things like that, or a potential employer. It's nice to be able to say, yeah, if you look at that's actually poor research that doesn't take into account a lot of things and a lot of variables, so that we can use that as to say, hey, I really can work at home more, but also just something to be aware of ourselves as we think about it. So one of the things is that it said is that it increases depression, I think, and it can decrease your ability to interact with people. So it's something that we have to continue to be cognizant of, so that we're ready for, if we get to work from home more, that we're ready for those things. And then I really liked the 4-day work week. I was actually going to ask that, and you had it already, so that's good. I actually just saw an article today that some group was trying to bring it to Trinidad here to start a 4-day work week. I don't see it happening. I see it not a thing here, but I applaud their efforts in really trying to bring it here.
Oh, that's great, Peter. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on the article and that you gave me about productivity really declines in work from home, which it doesn't. And the fact that we all need to be aware of how statistics and just bad research are being used and bandied about. But I love the fact that Trinidad thought about the 4-day work week. That's so perfect that you happen to have that example. That's great. Anybody else have any comments?
Hi, how are you doing today?
Ala, nice to see you.
Me too. Thank you for this discussion. This has been very enlightening. We kind of figured out that at some point there's going to be bad research or individuals not being able to read statistics or understand the context when we do statistics. But also I think there need to be a lot of discussion around we want to have a balanced lifestyle where people can take care of their families and also do the work that they need to do, being that majority middle class around the globe by the measurement of what is middle class per country. They cannot afford one job, going every day to work, and having a balanced lifestyle with their family or creating even a family. And I think that is very realistic now with the stress of life. I like how you touched on how women are not probably going to be represented, but I do think that women are still showing more often in meetings. There have to just be a push, a personal push from each to just speak up in the meetings. Because I don't see that changing. There's still going to be that men get together in restaurants or like meetings or lunches or whatever to have certain discussions. Yes, it is important to show up, specifically when you're invited, but speaking also in the meeting and having realistic expectations, I think that's difficult. And I see that reflecting now in like me and my friends and like specifically women. I can't speak about men, but for us, we're supposed to be taking care of our families. We're supposed to be aware of what's happening in their life, helping them in A, B, C, and D. Even if you're not married, I'm not married, and I still have to take care of my younger brothers and sisters when my father was sick. And also like my mom now is sick. So I have to do all that while working and making sure I show up, which is unrealistic. None of my evaluations have been bad ever. I always meet my deadline. I always do whatever I need to do, but I'm able to do it more often because I've been lucky even before the pandemic to have a job where I have the flexibility of working from anywhere. And I think that balance, companies need to be realistic about it. And I see that managers now are realizing that they need to figure out a better way to measure productivity, because whatever measures we have been using are not reflective because it depends on hours of you being in the office, but not really what have you produced in terms of what needs to be done. And I think people have difficulty realizing that whatever work we need to do, a lot of people are smart enough or skilled enough to do it in less than the 8 hours that we need to work in a day.
Yeah.
And it's just capitalism where I want to squeeze you to the last drop. And I think that's going to be the next coming, I think, conversations and people just being aware of what it is important to be in the office. I still, whenever I get the chance, majority of the time, I am in the office, even though I'm not, like, I don't have to. But balancing, I think, being realistic about how you want to balance your family and personal relations, but also your mental health, and being able to work at the same time just to make sure that you're surviving. Because at this point, I feel majority of individuals are working just to survive, unfortunately. But it seems that this is where everyone is, or majority. No, I'm not going to say everyone, but majority of people.
Thanks for those comments. I think that the second section, when I talked about environmental and cultural changes, I called it that because I'm seeing shifts and cracks in how and in what way people can get more balance in their lives, where all kinds of employees who felt marginalized in the past have more opportunities potentially. I can't say that it's going to change immediately, but the pandemic put people on notice about how things had to be done differently. I don't want to hold people up. We're a little over time. I try to not go beyond 45 minutes, but let me ask if anybody has any last comments. All right, great to see all of you all. You're all such good friends. And I will just do what I usually ask Ron to do, close the meeting by saying, thanks for showing up. For some of you, I know it's late at night. For some of you, you'll be watching the replay because it is late at night for you or early in the morning. It's always a pleasure to work with you on this topic, and it was a good review for me this time because so much has changed in terms of work from home, pretty well established, but now we're seeing other parts of our cultural and environmental shifts happening, and that was exciting. The next time we meet will be in August. We won't be meeting until the third week of August. You'll be getting an email about that, and I believe the first of the 2 August is when we're talking about AI and job implications for all of you. So more to come on that. Thanks again, and I will see you next time.